turns in interpreting. So hopefully you all enjoy it. If you want to ask questions, please wait until the presentation is finished, and then you can ask questions at the end. Otherwise it'll be too hard, trying to be too disruptive with everyone coming up. So please just wait until the presentation's done, and then when you ask a question, you can come up to the front and everyone can see your question and we can ask Christine. So now we'll hand it over to Christine. Thank you very much. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you so much everybody, and thank you so much for having me here. I did some presentations last year and one of your members saw my presentation and put me in contact with Bruce, so I'm so pleased that I get the opportunity to talk to you all here this morning. I'm just thinking to myself, I can see that I am being recorded, so I hope I'm on my best behaviour. I hope you've got me from the right angle. That's it, that's good. I'll try and suck in my stomach as best I can. I don't know if I can do that for a whole hour, but that's okay. I can see this is a wonderful venue you're holding it in today, and I think to myself, I know when you're losing interest if you stand up and go and play darts, so that's when I know I've lost you. What we're going to be talking about today is really, really important, and the most important part of what we're going to be speaking about today is talking about licensing. What happens after you turn 75? What happens after you turn 85? Now, I know you're all here just to prepare because I can see none of you look like you're 75 yet. So this will just be information for you when you get to that age. So, a little bit about the NRMA, because I am from the NRMA. And the first thing people say to me is they come up and they want to talk to me about their insurance. I'm not that NRMA. So the NRMA is two completely separate companies. You have NRMA Insurance and the NRMA. So think about roadside. If your car breaks down and you're a member and someone comes and fixes your car, if you have a caravan and you go caravanning a lot and you stay in some NRMA caravan parks, if you go into the city and catch the fast ferry, that's the NRMA I'm talking about. So that's where I'm from. And the NRMA is there for their members. It's a mutual, so it's member owned, and we're coming up to 3 million members, which we're going to be hitting very, very soon. So not bad for something that started 100 years ago. Actually more than 100 years ago, because we celebrated 100 years back in 2020. But this month we're actually celebrating 100 years of roadside service. So we've been keeping people moving for 100 years. Now, last year, for example, just to give you a very quick statistic, we had 1.4 million calls. 1.4 million people requiring assistance of one type or another. It used to be very New South Wales centric. We now have a lot of members in Queensland, a lot of members in Victoria, members in ACT, and we're slowly branching out across Australia. So we're keeping our important work moving. Just let me double check my stats here as I quietly walk backwards. Last year, we had 195,000 towed vehicles. So that's people that were stuck on the side of the road, needed to get somewhere else, and we supported them out. We also had about 909 animals locked in cars and close to 300 kids locked in cars. So we get a lot of phone calls from frantic parents who more than likely have locked the child and the dog and the keys inside the car. So that's always a good news story when we can get out there and our patrolmen are very well versed into getting all of the various cars, and we can very quickly save your children, your pets and your car keys. Just a very brief overview of what we are going to do today. So we're going to do just a very quick road rule refresher. I'll just step out of the screen just a little bit here so you can see. We'll do a road rules refresher, and we're going to move through that very, very quickly because you're all very experienced drivers. Sometimes it's just nice to hear it again. We're also going to talk about pedestrian safety because I think that's really important, because there is going to come a time in the future where potentially you are walking to shops should you have shops closely. And again, we're going to talk about what happens to you after you turn 75. One thing I do want to make really, really clear, and I will probably say this 3 or 4 times, so I'm reminding myself to say it now once, so I don't have to say it again. But I believe personally, and the NRMA believes, that you should continue to drive for as long as it is safe for you to do so. Some people come to this presentation and the first thing they say to me is, nobody's taking my license away, I'm not going to stop driving. That's not what this presentation is about. What I'm here to do is tell you exactly what the law is, tell you exactly what you have to do to keep your license. But when we talk about these things, I want you to keep your license as long as you are safe and as long as the people on the road around you are also safe. So please, if you take nothing else away today, please take that away. I want you to drive for as long as you possibly can. And then we'll talk about what's going to happen to you when you decide that you are going to retire from driving. That'll be right at the end. Let's just do a couple of very quick scenarios. Let's talk about merging. So there are 2 ways to merge. On the left here is what's known as a zipper merge. This is fairly new. You'll see now that the dotted line just ends and the 2 lanes merge into one. It's called a zipper merge. And then on the right-hand side, we have more of the traditional merge. You can see that left lane is ending and people need to move over into that right-hand lane because they are going to lose that left-hand lane. So, let's look at the one on the left here. There's an orange car, there is a blue car. Put your hand up if you think the blue car has right of way. Put your hand up if you think the orange car has right of way. Okay, let's leave that there for a moment.
I think the blue car does.
Let's move over to scenario 2. Do you think the orange car has right of way there? Or do you think the blue car has right of way? What's
Think blue. Just like orange hand up, that's orange hand up, orange. And blue handing up, that's blue. So orange one.
All right. I'm going to show you which car has the right of way and then I'm going to explain to you why. With the zipper merge, so remember we're talking about 2 lanes just coming into one, and that line in the middle disappears and we just move into one. Can you see that orange car has its nose in front? Because the orange car has the nose in front, technically it has the right of way. Now I say that to you, but I want you to be very careful and cautious. I don't want you to get into an accident and say, but I was right because I had my nose in front. Please don't have an accident to prove a point. You still have to have your wits about you, because as you well know, and this happened to me this morning, you might be in that orange car and you may feel you have the right of way, but suddenly the blue car will speed up to try not to let you in, right? Yeah. So what I'm saying is, by the letter of the law, the orange car is right. But I'll temper that by saying, please just move cautiously when you're coming together. On the right there, that's what we're used to. That's a merging situation we're used to, aren't we? We know that when the left-hand lane ends, that's our lane. If we're the orange car, our lane's ending. And we have to move into the other lane. And the other lane at the moment is owned by this blue car because they are already there. So what we would have to do in this scenario, if this was us, is of course slow down, slotting behind that blue car when it's safe to do so, and all is good. Let's move on. Let's talk about pedestrians. So here we have a situation where there's a blue car turning right, there's no crossing, there's no lights, but you can see a person that's stepped onto the road and they're moving through into the intersection. Now, who do you think has the right of way? The car or the pedestrian?
Car, walker, car has to stop, the car should stop, some saying 50-50, some saying car has to stop, let the person pass. Some comments?
You're all very, very smart in this room. Yes, it is the pedestrian that has the right of way, and I will tell you why that is. You have to think about who is the most vulnerable person on the road. And in this situation, the most vulnerable person, the most vulnerable between the car and the pedestrian is the person, isn't it? So we can see that they have an intention, they've stepped out onto the road and they're crossing, so we need to wait for them to do that before we make our turn. All right, are we allowed to do this?
We're definitely don't use our phone anyway. But we know you're not allowed to use
But
it.
I wanted to keep this in the presentation because you're also going to be driving with other people, and you want to be a responsible passenger. So you need to know what is right and wrong about a mobile phone. So if you need to say to someone, can you please stop? Can you please hang up that call? I was in a situation a couple of weeks ago where I got into a taxi and the taxi driver was using his mobile phone. And I very nicely and very politely asked him to stop. And so I think this is why it's really important to know. But not only that, very quickly I want to mention that it can't even be on a person's body when they're driving. They cannot make any contact with their phone at all when they are driving. You can't have it on your leg, you can't have it in your hands, you can't have it tucked under your arm. It has to be completely away, and the safest place for it is in a cradle. Because people use the GPS. We still use GPS to get around and put it on our maps. That's exactly right. Now, I want to talk about making a U-turn because this sometimes causes some problems as well. So if you have a look here, you can see that we've got a solid line in the left-hand picture, a solid line on the left in the middle picture, and then a double solid line on the right. When am I allowed to make a U-turn? Which one of these scenarios am I allowed to do a U-turn here?
They're saying one of the far. Saying none of them. Some of them saying none of them, some of them saying we're on the other side.
And the people who are saying, none of them, you each get a gold star if I had it. If you are driving along and the solid line is closest to you, you can't go across that line. There is only a couple of circumstances when you can do that. That is if you are turning into your house or you're visiting someone and you're turning into your driveway, then you can. Or if you're picking up some petrol, turning into a 7-Eleven or a shopping centre, but you cannot do a U-turn at any of those. In that middle picture, if I was travelling down this way and I had the dotted line on my side, then I could do a U-turn when it's safe to do so. Always when it's safe. Let's have a look at these, because you will see these popping up everywhere, and a lot of the councils now are adopting these lines. And sometimes you will see these lines accompanied with a sign, but sometimes now you will just see this solid yellow line. Now this solid yellow line tells you that you are not allowed to pull over at any stage. At any stage. The only time you are allowed to do that is if you suddenly become a bus driver and you're driving a bus and you're dropping passengers off and picking them up, or if you are having some sort of medical emergency and you have to stop your car. Other than those two reasons, you cannot stop there. And I think that's really a good idea, because if you can think of a spot right now where you've seen this solid line, they're fairly busy roads, aren't they? And it wouldn't really be a place that you would want to pull up and park your car on the side of the road either way. But if you see the straight line, that tells you that you cannot park there. If you see a dotted line, a yellow dotted line like this in the gutter, generally the ruling is that during those peak hour times, so that morning peak hours, we used to say hour, now it's hours because we have so much traffic, but that bulk of traffic in the morning and that bulk of traffic in the afternoon will be the times when you can't park there. And you will see nearby, somewhere along the road at fairly regular intervals, it might be 20 metres, it might be 50 metres, you will see a sign, a clearway sign that will tell you the hours that you're allowed to park there and the hours that you are not allowed to park there. Although, for me personally, again, these are all quite busy roads. And if I can find a side street to pull into and park in instead, I'll do that. Because I don't want to be parked on the side of the road and have cars trying to whiz around my car. Okay, you would have all seen this now because they are literally everywhere. We're talking about the Dragon's Teeth school zones, 100% right. When they first started, we saw the sign and it tells you exactly when you can and can't park there. Most of the signs now, you'll notice, have been upgraded with a solar panel. So they will flash at those times to let you know when those hours of operation is up. But generally, most schools are 8 to 9:30, and then of course again in the afternoon from 2:30 to 4. Now, there are exceptions to this rule. If you've ever been out Maryland's way and you have driven anywhere near Maryland's East Primary School, they have changed their school hours. They start school at 7 or 7:30 in the morning, I think it is, and they finish by 2 o'clock. Now, because of that, their signs don't have those times. Their signs have different times. There's also a school if you're driving in the entrance up north. The high school on the entrance road, you will notice the hours of operation of the school zone is different. And the good thing about that is, where the black writing is now with the times, they put that in red to let you know that the times are different. So when you're coming into the school zone, you might look at your clock and think, oh, I'm outside the school zone, just glance at the sign as you're getting to it to see, is the timing red? And do I need to pay attention to that? Because you don't want to be caught out. The other thing you might notice is sometimes there are days where there are no kids at school. Some call them pupil-free days, others call them teacher professional learning days, but you know what I mean. There's a day sometimes at the beginning of the term or the end of the term where the teachers are working, but the students aren't at school. You still have to obey this sign. Any day that is gazetted by the Department of New South Wales as a school day, these signs will be in operation and you must follow them. They do that to avoid confusion, because can you imagine how confusing it would be if you drive past 3 or 4 different schools? You're not going to know at each of the schools whether or not they're having a pupil-free day that day. So if it's a school day, then you're going to see the sign flashing and you have to obey the sign. Oh, okay, let's talk about roundabouts. All right, I do this because sometimes we can all get sidetracked with roundabouts, and we can talk about roundabouts until the cows come home, and I don't want to do that because I want to get to the important, juicy stuff at the end of the presentation. So what I'm going to do is give you a quick rundown, and then if you want to come and talk to me about roundabouts at the end of the presentation, I'm quite happy to stay, play darts with you, and talk about roundabouts. So, let's very quickly think about roundabouts. And it's probably best in your mind if you can think of a roundabout that you use. And I want you to think about a small roundabout, and I want you to think about a larger roundabout. So when I'm saying small roundabout, I'm just talking one lane. There might only be 3 roads coming off that, maybe 4 very quiet roads. The best thing to think about with roundabouts is, what would that intersection look like if the roundabout wasn't there? Someone has to give way to somebody, don't they? So generally what we say, the legislation says that you have to give way to cars already in the roundabout. But we need to refine that a little bit more, because if we're in a large roundabout and there's a car all the way over the other side, that's not really practical. So you need to think about the old rule of giving away to your right. That's really the crux of what you need to know. So you need to get to that intersection, treat it like a give way sign. It's no accident that the roundabout sign looks like a give way sign. It just has something different in the middle of it, because it's asking everybody that's coming into that to take care and potentially have to give way, just like you would if you're coming up to a 4-way intersection. When you get there, you're obviously going to look to your right. You're going to check and make sure that it is safe for you to get out into that roundabout. If you are unsure, wait. But as soon as you see that it is safe for you to move into that roundabout, move in. Now, the blinker. If we come up, let's pretend we're at this roundabout here on this picture, and we're the green car. If I'm turning left, I'm going to be in the left-hand lane. I'm going to put my blinker on and I'm going to turn. Easy. If I'm going straight ahead, I have the option of being in the left-hand lane or the right-hand lane. I can pick either of these lanes to move through. If I want to turn right, I need to be in the right hand lane. And I need to have my right hand blinker on. Now this is quite a big roundabout. So as I'm driving up here into the right hand lane, I've got my right hand blinker on, I'm turning, and now I need to prepare to get off. To prepare to get off the roundabout, I put my left hand blinker on because I'm actually going left. So we're going right blinker, right blinker, right blinker, and then left blinker as we get off. So I'm not going to bore you anymore with that, but if you want to know more, please let's talk about it later. Cyclists, remember when I said to you, we have to take care of the most vulnerable person on the road. And now the most vulnerable person on the road between you in a car and a cyclist is the cyclist, isn't it? So we need to have rules around that, because quite often now you will see, especially if you go driving around somewhere where it's a little bit hilly and the cyclists are getting in their practice, if you are going past somebody on a bicycle, they are as far to the left as they can be, that's where they should be riding, but you need to give them a distance of 1 metre when you're going around them. So your car should be 1 metre away from that cyclist. If you're going over 60 kilometres an hour, then it's 1.5 metres away from that cyclist. Now I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, but wait a minute, I've got to stay in my lane and try and keep 1 metre away or 1.5 metres away. How do I do it? This is where the law allows you. If you are driving along the road, and remember we talked about that solid line, there's another exception to the rule. If you are passing a cyclist and you have to go over that line to give them the 1 metre or the 1.5 metre, then you can do that when it is safe to do so. So you have to be ultra careful that there is nothing coming the other way, that you can safely move your car around. If you can't safely manoeuvre your car around the cyclist, then you need to sit behind the cyclist and wait until it is clear, and then you can go around them. Okay, going to go through just a few safe driving tips. What you can see on this slide is the 5 most common crash types. So of everything, of all of the crashes we know, these are generally the 5 of how accidents occur. I call them accidents, they're not, they're crashes, because they're always someone's fault. So what I want you to do now is I want you to have a look at these 5 types, and I want you to tell me which one do you think is most likely caused by speed, fatigue, or distraction? What number? Oh, which one? Speed. Oh no, which one? So speed, fatigue, or distraction is one of these, caused by one of these. Number 2, number 1, it is number 4. fatigue, distraction. Generally, this happens on a regional or country road. People are unfamiliar with their surroundings, so they're driving a little bit faster than they're probably comfortable with, and we find that people will tend to go off the road as a single car accident and crash into something on the side, generally because they've fallen asleep, they were distracted, or they were just going too fast. So now I would like you to look at crash type 3. Crash type 3 is caused by what we call, it's a technical term, poor gap selection. So they're the people you see who are a little bit impatient, and they'll come shooting around and probably in front of you. I'm sure that's happened to you. People like this have to have a greater level of patience and wait. If you're not adhering to a stop sign or a give way sign, then you're going to have a crash like this. And I have saved the best for last. If you are following too close to another car, you are going to end up having a crash
Tailgating,
like
they call it.
this. Now, we very affectionately call this type of crash the rear ender. And it is the most common type of crash in a city location. And I think that probably makes sense to you, doesn't it? Because how often have you been in the car and somebody behind you is sitting right behind you? We know that we need what they call a 3-second gap. Can you put your hand up if you've heard of the 3-second gap?
Yes, some yes,
Some
no.
yes.
Yeah, you need to be able to see the tyres, the car in front, and you should be able to see the car tyres. And the blue one should stop.
So there's two different things we're talking about here. So when we're traveling in a car and you want to make sure that you're maintaining a safe distance from the car in front, as you're traveling, pick a landmark at the side as that car in front of you is going through it, and then count in your head 1, 2, 3. And then you should be passing that same landmark. If you pass that same landmark too quickly, drop back and give a little bit more space. When you come to a stop, one of these ladies over here was exactly right. You need to be able to see the tyres hitting the road of the car in front of you when you stop. That's how you know you've stopped a safe gap. And what that does is that reduces the chance that if somebody rear-ends you, it reduces the chance of you rear-ending that car in front. Because if you're at a standstill and somebody hits you, you are going to be moving forward. Okay, what I want to talk about with this slide is I want to talk about making your life easier. Sometimes, and this picture is exactly what happens to me when I go to my local shopping centre on the weekend. Exactly. I've got 2 ways I can get into the shopping centre. I can either put my right hand blinker on, and then when the light changes, I've got to be mindful of there's someone darting across the road there and they didn't wait for the walk sign. I've got somebody on a bike who may or may not be doing the right thing and stopping at the lights they may be coming through. I've then got to turn very quickly, thinking about these things, but then I very quickly have to put my left hand blinker on to turn left into the shopping centre. It's a little bit stressful. There's a lot going on. I'm watching people, I'm watching other cars, I'm watching somebody on a bike. I'm trying to negotiate a right-hand turn. I'm very quickly putting my left-hand blinker on, hoping the person behind me has seen that and doesn't rear-end me. So then I went away and thought about it, and I realised that it takes me probably about 60 to 90 seconds longer, but if I go straight ahead at this set of lights, I can actually just do a block loop, and then I'm coming through this set of lights. I don't have to negotiate too much here. I've got plenty of time to put my left hand blinker on and turn into the shopping centre. It's not as stressful for me. So I want you to think about all the places you go in your day, whether it be coming here, whether it be going to the shops, whether it be going to doctor's appointments, whether it be going to visit family and friends, and think about the way you go. And if there is a way that's a little bit stressful to you, perhaps is there a way that you can just go do an additional block and come a little bit straighter at that intersection? Less stress. I actually think it's worth the additional 90 seconds. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is blind spots. I know you know that there are blind spots in your car, and it doesn't matter how old your car is, it doesn't matter how much you paid for your car, there is still not the technology and there is no way of 100% getting rid of blind spots. They're always going to be there. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we are using our head checks properly. Because you can see from this picture, the blue sections there are blind spots. Just by sitting in your car, they're the areas you can't see. So what you need to always make sure, this is why head checks are mandatory. I was actually talking to a couple of our driving instructors just yesterday about this. And they say sometimes, or in many cases, when they do senior assessments, that people will fail because they don't do the head check. It's really important because it demonstrates that you have taken into account all of the conditions around you. Behind you is another tricky thing. If you have a look on the picture on the left, that's what I can see when I look in my rear vision mirror. When I turn around and look, that's what I can see out the back. Better, but not perfect. So if you're ever reversing, you need to be mindful, especially when you're coming out of a driveway and you're crossing a footpath, that this may be happening behind you. This girl has stopped behind the car to fix the dog's collar, bending over, so when you're looking in the rear vision mirror, you're not going to be able to see her. If you have a car with a reversing camera, then that's great, you're probably going to notice. But even if you do, don't get complacent with that. Because if there was a ball that has gone up under your car and the child has ducked right down underneath to get it, that's not going to show up on your reversing camera either. What's the best thing we can do? If you are reversing, any time you are reversing, we say and recommend that you reverse at walking speed. So if you reverse nice and slowly, If there is someone behind your car that you haven't seen, you may bump them with your car, but chances are at walking speed you are not going to kill them. And that's what we're trying to prevent. There is something else you can do, and I do this. Now, my friends always joke and say, Christine, you just like to reverse everywhere because you want to show how good your driving skill is. Not true. Well, maybe a little bit true. But I'm trying to be safe. So what I do when I get home is I reverse into my driveway. Because I can see when I drive up that it is nice and safe for me to do that. I will reverse into my driveway, and then that way in the morning when I'm ready to go, when I'm walking out to my car, I'm already looking at what's happening in front of me. I'm getting in the car, and I know that when I drive away, that there is not anybody going to be under the front of my car. But in saying that, when I drive out of my driveway, I still always do it at walking speed until I get to the road. Especially in my area, I have a lot of people who walk. A lot of women with prams and small children that are walking, and I'm very mindful of that. Why? Because they're more vulnerable on the road. Hopefully you can see this picture. A couple of things I want to point out to you. We talk about driving being a very complex skill. And the reason why we call it a complex skill is because there is a lot happening at the same time. Now, I'm not going to go through each one of these, but what I'm going to say is, if this is me driving down the street or you driving down the street, immediately we should be noticing a couple of things. Immediately we should be noticing that there is this woman here who has decided for whatever reason not to walk on the footpath where is the safest place for her, but she's actually walking on the side of the road. Now potentially she's walking in the most dangerous place on the road here because of this chicane that's making us move around. So we really need to wait until she clears this area before we move around so we don't clip her. You will also notice here, probably hard to see if you're sitting at the back, but the wheels of this car are turned out. So what that's suggesting to me is that's someone that's going to pull out. Are they going to pull out now? Are they going to wait till I go past? I'm not sure. I have to watch them and take it easy. So now I'm watching the person who may or may not pull out in front of me. I'm watching the woman who is walking in the most dangerous part, but I'm also thinking ahead, because when I negotiate this car and this woman, I can see a car down here that's just stopped. Now, this keep left pole that's here in the middle, I can't see if that car is stopping and going to reverse park in a spot there, or if they've got their right-hand blinker on and they're going to come and turn in here. I'm not sure yet, but I need to be careful, because if this person has poor gap selection, they may just want to turn right in front of me as I get to them. So I need to watch. But I'm also looking far ahead, and you would know in this area there's a lot of building going on all the time. And there are some areas where they just finish one building and they start another. And now I've got to think to myself, when I get close here, there's probably going to be road closures. There's probably going to be lanes that are different from when I was here last time. So all of these things I'm thinking about all at the one time. Why? Because I need to make sure I'm keeping myself safe when I'm driving. So let's have a look here. We've driven a little bit further up the road and we've come to this intersection. There's a few things happening here that I want you to be aware of. You can see there that it's a school zone. So I've got to make sure, what's my speed? Is it between those times? It looks like the light is flashing, so I'm going to have to obey that. At the same time, I'm thinking, this car here has his left-hand blinker on. They're going to turn left at the intersection. I don't know about you, but I know quite a few times someone will put their left-hand blinker on, turn their left-hand blinker off at the last minute, probably when you're beside them, and go straight ahead. So, we need to watch, what is that person going to do? And look what I said before, they're doing some building works, so for sure they have closed that left-hand lane. So you know what potentially is going to happen to me? This person is not going to turn left, they're going to want to go straight ahead, but of course that lane is now closed. So guess where they're coming? Over to me, right into my lane. So I need to be careful of that. I also need to be careful because I can see there is a car here that's waiting at the lights. Are they just waiting there because they haven't seen the lights change? Are they going to turn right? I have to keep half an eye on them because they may turn right in front of me, and I've got to be careful to cover my brake as I come through that intersection. Again, complex is a driving task. Driving is a complex task. Now, all that we've just spoke about then, we call that low-risk driving. Back in the day, it used to be called defensive driving. We don't use that term anymore. They've rebranded it and made it prettier and sexier and called it low-risk driving. So all of those things that we just spoke about, that's all to do with low-risk driving. Very quickly, pedestrian safety. Obviously, you're going to, as a pedestrian, be observant of cars around you. Because you're a pedestrian and you know you're the most vulnerable person on the road, that doesn't mean the person in the car is going to be mindful of that either. So just like you feel like you have to drive for everybody else, you also have to walk for everybody else as well. Now, let's go back to roundabouts for a second. I need to cross a roundabout. I need to get from this side of the road to the other side of the road. There are 3 points in a roundabout where you can cross. Point A is right back away from the roundabout. Point B is right through the guts. Or point C is right up close to the roundabout. Now, if you were getting to the other side of the road, where would you want to cross? A, B, or C?
C, A, B, A.
Okay. I will tell you, 100% if you can, always cross a point A. And the reason why is because it's away from the business of the roundabout. Remember, we spoke about roundabouts and people are worrying about what lane they're in and who they're giving away to and how far they're coming around before they're then turning their left-hand blinker on. There is a lot going on in the context of that roundabout. And you, as a pedestrian, want to be as far away from that as you possibly can be. Now, never, ever, 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 ever go B. Don't go B. Don't go through the middle. In most cases, it's really hard to walk through point B anyway, because you'll find that in a lot of cases there'll be a planting in the middle of the roundabout, It's usually agapanthus or some sort of native thing, or they might even be weeds. They might have planted something there and then it's just weedy and nothing now. And they do this for two reasons. Planting in the middle of the roundabout, they did research on that. And research told us that planting in the middle of roundabouts not only looks prettier, if they don't die, looks prettier, but also people will go around a roundabout slower if there's planting in the middle. An interesting fact. Now, point C, I've put this here because sometimes we have no choice. If you are pushing a pram, if you have a walker, if you're in a chair, sometimes the road makers will put the dip of the road at the gutter right here at point C. Why they don't put it at point A, I'm not sure. But they put it at point C. So there are times that you are going to have no choice but to cross at point C. And if that's the case, you need to be ultra careful about when you cross. You really have to be sure that you either have enough space and time, or you need to be 100% sure that the motorists have seen you crossing. So please take great care there. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about your health and driving. Now, before I say that, I'll be very transparent with you. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a government employee. I'm just a teacher. So I'm telling you this information. I'm telling you what legislation is saying. If at any point I say something and you think, oh, that's interesting, I wonder if that applies to me, my best advice to you is please go and see your doctor. That would be the thing I would do. So, what I want to do is I want to acknowledge that we need to have our wits about us when we drive. So this is why we go for eye tests, we make sure our vision is good. But I wanted to particularly touch on dementia because we know, research has told us, people can get dementia at any age, but it's more prevalent after you are 65. So then the question is, what do we do? Because we will notice with onset of dementia that over time, our driving skill will decline. You may notice this in a loved one, in another family member, maybe with a friend. And this is where you may need to have some conversations that are a little bit difficult about someone perhaps needing to consider the thought that they may need to retire from driving. Now, if someone you know that you support or yourself, if you are diagnosed with dementia, the first thing that needs to be done is that needs to be reported to Services New South Wales. Because they will probably, or they will, send you for a medical. You will need to go back to your doctor, and your doctor in most cases will determine whether or not you still have the driving skill to drive. If the doctor wants more information, they may send you to an occupational therapist who will do some testing with you to look at where your skill level is at that time. And from there, Services New South Wales will make a determination as to whether or not you keep your licence or whether they give you a modified licence. or whether they don't believe you have the skill to be safe on the road and to be safe with others on the road. Now, this gets reviewed once every 12 months because we know dementia, it declines over time. Your skill and capacity will decline over time. So that is reviewed annually. The other thing I've had people say to me, and I think it's really important to address, is they say, oh, if I get a diagnosis, I'm just not going to say anything. I'll just keep driving. My response to that is, you will have zero insurance. Now, I'm sure you're like me and you feel like you've been paying for car insurance since birth. Now, all of those years, all of that money that you've put into insurance, you don't want to jeopardize that at this point. If you have a diagnosis and you don't report it and you have an accident, then you are 100% liable. You will have no insurance. So I think that's a really important point to consider. Now, sometimes you may notice that somebody's driving ability just declines. So there'll be some things you notice. You might not feel as safe with them in the car. Maybe they're braking later, maybe they're braking too early, maybe they're indecisive about when they're going to turn at an intersection. These are all of the things that might be signs that whether or not there's a diagnosis that goes with that maybe it might be time for that person to consider retiring from driving or consider a modified license. A really big giveaway, if somebody is driving and you happen to notice that there is more dents and dings and scratches on their car, that's a sure sign that they may have declining driving skill. Okay, let's get to the good stuff. This book here on the screen, when you turn 75, you'll get a copy of that sent to you. If you don't get a copy of that sent to you, you can go to Services New South Wales and pick up a copy. It's free. If you're really good Googling, you can go to Services New South Wales, type in older drivers, and you can get a copy of this book online and read it online. It's a great book. So all of the things I'm talking about here are all things that are in this book. So you don't have to remember, you just have to get this book, save it on your laptop or save it somewhere at home, and then you're going to have that information readily at hand. When you get that book, when you turn 75, you'll also receive a lovely letter that you have to take to your doctor, and he has to say that you are still medically fit to drive. He may send you for an eye test. He may send you for any sort of test that he needs to satisfy that you're still safe to drive. Once he ticks you off medically, most doctors, and I'm sure your doctor is in this boat, are now hooked to Services New South Wales online. So they can actually complete that form online and send it straight away. Now, just for your information, if that's what your doctor does, my best advice to you is to make sure it has gone through. Because unfortunately, I've spoken to some people, because I do this presentation a lot, and I've spoken to some people whose doctors have assured them it's gone through, but Services New South Wales didn't receive it at their end, and they just cancel your licence if they don't receive the form. So my best advice to you would be to either ring, or as you're going past in your travels, duck into Services New South Wales and speak to them to make sure that that letter is there and everything is signed off for your licence for another 12 months. It's just a bit of peace of mind for you. You don't have to do that, but I think I would want to do that. Now, at 75, you may decide that the way your life is, you only drive to certain areas. Perhaps your doctors are close by, your shopping centre's close by, your friends are close by, your family is close by. You may not travel more than a radius of 10 kilometres around your house. You can talk to your doctor and restrict your own driving. You might say, I'd like to opt for a modified licence, please, because I only travel to these areas. And then that's something you negotiate with your doctor. It goes on to another form, back to Services New South Wales, and you might opt for a modified licence from that point. Each year, you still need to pass the medical though. Be wary of that. Okay, so what happens when you turn 85? Something a little bit different happens when you turn 85. At 85, you still need the annual medical. That never changes. Every year that you drive after 75, you need that annual medical. But from 85, you also need a driving assessment. If you want to maintain the licence that you have now, the unrestricted licence, then you will need to have a senior assessment every 2 years. So at 85, 87, 89, 91, etc. Now, there are 2 options you can do with this. You can just go to Services New South Wales, book in for an assessment or a test like people do with their learners and their Ps, and then you go out with one of their assessment people. They will drive you around, ask you to do a number of things, and then they'll determine whether or not you can maintain your licence for another 2 years. It doesn't cost you anything. That's free. However, you can only do that 3 times. So if you don't pass on the first go, and then you don't pass on the second go, and then you don't pass on the third go, either they will suspend or modify your licence quite heavily. Now, there's a second option, and I think this is the nicer option. The only downside is it's going to cost you a little bit of money. What you can do is you can find a senior assessor. So many driving schools, and the NRMA driving school is one of them. I'm sorry, they're my employer, I need to say that. But you can contact the NRMA driving school and you can ask them for a senior assessment. And generally what most people do is they have a refresher session and an assessment all in one go. And so what happens is they come to your house and pick you up. So you're driving around streets that you know, streets that you are comfortable with. You're then building a rapport with the person in the passenger seat. The senior assessor will give you a little bit of a brush up. And then generally what we find is after being in the car for a small amount of time, they say, oh, and guess what? You've actually passed. And then they sign you off and you take that to Services New South Wales and say, I've been passed for another 2 years, and they give you that. Sorry. And they will give you that license for another 2 years. Now that is a much nicer way to do it, a little bit more of a friendlier way. But there is one thing I want to tell you, because the stress and the worry is then, oh, I have to do another test. I hate tests. Am I going to pass a test? What if they ask me how far I need to park away from the corner? What if they make me do a hill start on a really, really awful hill? What if they make me reverse park into a spot that there is no way I can reverse park into there? And then it becomes stressful. Well, to ease your mind, I think there's a question.
What about having an automatic? You have an automatic, you don't need to worry about a hill start on an automatic. Yeah. So can you ask just to move an automatic car?
Can I just say, you don't need to worry about a hill start at all. All those things that I've just mentioned aren't even in the assessment. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tell you exactly what is in the assessment. And when I tell you, you will say, really? Really? You will be surprised. The assessment for seniors has 10 what we call fail-safe items. If you do all 10, you pass. If you don't do all 10, then you have to resit the assessment. It's only a practical assessment. There's no theory, no picking A, B or C. It's just you getting in the car and driving around your local area, and they will be watching out for these things. So let me tell you, and you tell me whether you think you're going to pass. The first thing you will fail on. You will fail if you disobey traffic signs, signals, or road markings. Fair enough? The second one, you will fail if you don't give way when necessary. So if you're coming into an intersection and you pull out in front of a car and nearly cause an accident, that's a fail. I think that's fair enough too. The next one that you fail on, which can I say, I think that you absolutely should fail if you don't get this one right. You will fail if you collide with a vehicle, pedestrian or object. Don't run into anything. The next one, if they deem that you have performed an illegal act or manoeuvre. So that might be, as we were talking about before, you did a U-turn across double yellow lines, you disobeyed a sign, any of those sorts of things, that's another fail. If you exceed the speed limit, you will fail. So stay under the speed limit. If you do anything that requires the assessment officer to intervene, if they have to grab the wheel, put their foot on the brake, do anything to intervene with your driving, that's a fail. If you are found to have caused a dangerous situation, if you cause a dangerous situation that's a danger to yourself or any other road users, that's a fail. And the final thing you will fail for is if you don't maintain proper control of the vehicle. That's it. That's it. There's no asking where you can park, reverse parked, parallel parking, angle parking, questioning you. It's just all of those things are things that you do right now as a good driver. So all you have to do is sit beside the assessor and they'll say, turn left here, turn right here. You'll follow their directions, and if you are a safe driver, as you all are already, you are going to pass for another 2 years. Now, if you are looking for a senior assessor, like I said, you can have a look on the My NRMA website. So look at that, mynrma.com.au. Or if you go onto Services New South Wales, you can simply get a whole list of senior assessors in your area and you can select from there. So they're very, very easy to find. Okay, now, remember I said to you that this was a really good book? Another really good book is available on the My NRMA website, which is Maintaining Your Driving Independence. And that's written by us, and that is also a good read, and you can get that online as well. So I think between the information you get in that Services New South Wales book and the information that you get from the NRMA book, then I think that's going to give you all of the information that you are going to need to make sure you successfully continue to drive. Okay. Now, I'm going to take a guess and say most of the people in this room are retired. So if I'm using that as yes, most of the people in this room are retired, you didn't just wake up one morning and stop driving. You didn't working. You didn't just wake up and say, I'm not going to work today, that's it, I'm retired. What did you do? You planned. You planned for your retirement. You planned your finances. You might have planned in terms of your future living arrangements. You may have planned your holidays out. You may have stepped down to retirement by cutting back the number of hours you work, but you didn't just stop. Retiring from driving is exactly the same. Now you've all demonstrated that you very successfully became retirees. So with the right planning and organisation, you can also retire from driving. Again, you wouldn't just get up one morning and say, that's it, I'm not driving anymore. Well, you might, that's up to you. But I'm thinking that this is going to be a process of you're going to plan a number of things. So some of those things you may need to plan is you may need to look around at what community supports there are in your area. That there may be a bus or some sort of transport options that you can get to medical appointments, to the grocery store, many places like that. So a great thing to do would be to talk to your doctor about it and see what options you have from your doctor. You can also ring your local council. Ask your council, what community transport options do they have? You may not need them right now, but it would be nice to know. You can start having a look at how you're going to use your seniors Opal card. Are you going to be able to travel by train? Are you going to be able to travel by bus? I also want you not to
berries and train.
I also want you not to discount. Well done. Well done. Bruce is organised. I also want you to consider something as well. Think about how much money you spend on your car each week. Now, at the NRMA, we affectionately call the car a lazy asset. Why is it a lazy asset? Number one, it depreciates. Number two, where does it sit? It sits in your driveway. It sits downstairs here in the car park. It sits in the shopping centre. It sits outside your friend's house. Our car spends more time stationary than it does moving. And for that privilege, we pay insurances, we pay petrol, we pay maintenance and running costs, we're changing tyres. Now, you might have a lovely car, you may even have a car loan. Now, we have determined that roughly, if you don't have a car loan, then this figure won't resonate with you. But for a lot of people, when you work it out over the course of a year, it's about $300 a week that we spend on our cars, taking into account all of those things I just mentioned. $300 a week. Can you imagine how many Ubers and taxis you can get for $300 a week? So if you're keeping your car running now, I want you, as you're preparing to retire from driving, I'm not saying today, when you're preparing to retire from driving, I want you to seriously work out how much your car costs you each week. And then what I want you to do is think about how many taxis could you get with that? You may be able to go to the shops and back 3 times a week by taxi and not spend any more money than you're spending now. So please don't be horrified if you think, oh, it'll cost me too much. Because that may not be true. But again, planning. That's it. I'm done. Thank you very much. Now, questions.
Someone to come up?
Oh, I thought he was going down screen. I think he was back now the front.
So I'm talking about U-turns. So making a U-turn into a driveway. So when you turn into a driveway across oncoming traffic, you can do that.
Now, are you turning into the driveway to stop in the driveway, or are you just using that driveway to do a U-turn instead of doing a U-turn? Yeah, no.